The cantina on Kepler 7 space station buzzed with noise and smoke. Alien warriors from across the galaxy sat at round tables, drinking strange liquids and telling lies about their victories. The air smelled of fuel and sweat from a dozen different species. In the darkest corner of the room, away from the bright lights and loud voices, sat a creature that made others nervous. Zekthara was a Vorac, one of the most feared warrior races in known space. His body was covered in thick, dark shell-like skin that looked like armor. 4 powerful arms ended in clawed hands that could crush metal. Scars covered every inch of his body, telling stories of countless battles. But tonight, Zekthara just wanted to drink alone. At the center table, 3 young Krillian soldiers were getting louder with each drink. Their blue skin glowed brighter as they laughed and bragged about their recent raids on cargo ships. "The Terrans are so weak," one of them said, his voice carrying across the room. Pink skin, tiny claws, only 2 arms. "How did such pathetic creatures ever leave their homeworld?" His friends laughed and agreed. "I heard they cry water from their eyes when they are scared," another added. "What kind of warrior does that?" "The humans will be slaves within a year," the third one said. "The hegemony will crush them like insects." Zekthara's drink glass cracked in his grip. The sound was small, but in that moment the entire cantina seemed to go quiet. All eyes turned to the scarred Vorac in the corner. Slowly, Zekthara stood up. His massive form cast shadows across half the room. Each step toward the young soldiers sounded like thunder on the metal floor. The other aliens in the cantina moved away, sensing danger. "You speak of humans as prey," Zekthara said. His voice was deep and rough like rocks grinding together. The translator device on his chest worked hard to change his words into common speech. "I have fought them. I have seen what they become when cornered." The 3 Krillians looked at each other nervously. Everyone in the galaxy knew about Vorac warriors. They were born for battle, raised for war, and feared by all. If one of them was talking about humans with respect, maybe they had been wrong. "Tell us, old warrior," one of them said, trying to sound brave. "What makes these soft mammals so special?" Zekthara's 4 eyes stared at them for a long moment. Then he walked back to his table and sat down heavily. "You want to know about humans? I will tell you about Proxima Station." The cantina grew completely silent. Even the bartender stopped cleaning glasses to listen. 3 cycles ago, the hegemony decided to take the human mining station at Proxima Centauri. It was small, unimportant. Only 30 humans worked there, mining rare metals from the asteroids. The station had no weapons, no shields, no defenses. It should have been easy. Zekthara paused to take a drink. The liquid burned his throat. But the pain felt good. It reminded him he was still alive. "I was leading 3,000 Vorac raiders. The best warriors the hegemony had. We had warships, plasma cannons, assault armor. The humans had mining tools and empty space around them. Any sane species would have surrendered immediately. But they didn't?" asked one of the Krillians. "No," Zekthara said quietly, "they did not." He closed his eyes, remembering. The human commander was named Jake Morrison, a small man with gray hair and kind eyes. When we contacted the station to demand surrender, he appeared on our screen wearing dirty work clothes. He looked tired, like he had been working hard all day. "What did he say?" "He said, 'We're not going anywhere. This is our home now. If you want it, come and take it.'" Zekthara laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. We thought he was joking. 30 humans against 3,000 Vorac, it was madness. But humans, I learned, have a different kind of madness than the rest of us. The old warrior stood up again and began to pace. His claws clicked on the metal floor with each step. "We attacked expecting to finish in 1 hour. Instead, the battle lasted 6 days. 6 days of the hardest fighting I have ever seen. Those humans turned their mining station into a fortress of death." "How?" The question came from somewhere in the crowd. More aliens had gathered to listen. They used everything. Mining lasers became weapons. Cargo containers became bombs. They took apart their own life support systems to make traps. When we tried to board the station, they used the mining equipment to grab our ships and crush them. Zekthara's voice grew quieter, forcing everyone to lean in to hear. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was Morrison himself. That tired old human with kind eyes became something else when the fighting started. He was everywhere. At once, leading his people, fixing their weapons, carrying wounded fighters to safety. On the third day, we managed to damage their main power core. Half the station went dark and cold. We thought we had won. But Morrison and his people just kept fighting in the darkness. They knew every pipe, every wire, every room. We were blind, stumbling around while they picked us off one by one. One of the Krillians shifted uncomfortably. Surely your superior numbers meant something? Numbers mean nothing when you cannot use them, Zekthara replied. The station corridors were narrow. Only a few of us could attack at once. And every time we thought we had them trapped, they would appear somewhere else. They used maintenance shafts, air vents, even the garbage disposal system to move around. On the fifth day, Morrison contacted us again. He looked terrible. His clothes were torn and bloody. Burns covered his arms. One of his eyes was swollen shut, but he was still smiling. What did he say? He said, "Having fun yet?" "Because we're just getting started." Zekthara stopped pacing and looked around the room. Every alien there was listening carefully now. That night they started singing. All 30 humans singing together while they fought. We could hear them through the walls, through our comm systems, echoing through the station. They sang songs. About their homeworld, about their families, about never giving up. They sang while they killed my warriors. They sang while they died. By the 6th day, we had lost over 800 troops. 800 of the finest Vorthic warriors, killed by 30 humans with mining tools. My commanders wanted to retreat. They said the station was not worth the cost. But you stayed? Yes, because I had to know. I had to understand what these humans were, so I led the final assault myself. Zekthara sat back down and finished his drink in one gulp. We broke through. Their last defenses, just as their power finally failed completely. The station was dark and silent. We found Morrison in the command center, sitting in his chair like a king on his throne. 29 of his people were dead. He was alone, wounded, his weapons broken. He looked up at me with his remaining good eye and smiled. Blood was running down his face, but he was still smiling. He raised his hand and said, "Good fight. Your move." I had him surrounded by 50 warriors. He had no weapons, no hope, no way to win. But he was not afraid. He was ready to keep fighting with his bare hands if necessary. The cantina was completely silent now. Even the machines seemed to have stopped humming. That is when I understood. Zekthara said slowly, "Humans do not fight to win. They fight because fighting is what they do. They fight because someone has to. They fight because they refuse to stop being who they are, even when stopping would save their lives." What happened to Morrison? I let him live. I told my troops that he had earned the right to survive. Some called me weak, but I did not care. That human had taught me something important about courage. Zekthara looked directly at the 3 young Krillians who had started this conversation. You think humans are weak because they cry tears and have soft skin. But I have seen what they become when someone threatens what they love. They do not retreat. They do not surrender. They simply continue, no matter what happens to them. And that, he said, standing up to leave, is why smart warriors fear them. The cantina remained silent long after the scarred Vorthak had gone. The 3 young Krillians sat staring at their drinks, no longer laughing about easy victories over. Soft pink humans, outside the cantina, ships continued to arrive and depart from Kepler 7 station. But inside, alien warriors sat quietly, thinking about a species that sang while it fought and smiled while it died. Some of them began to wonder if the war against humanity was really such a good idea after all. 3 rotations had passed since Zekthara told his first story about humans. Word had spread through Kepler 7 station like fire through dry grass. Every night, more aliens came to the cantina hoping to hear the scarred Vorthak warrior speak again. Tonight was no different. The cantina was packed with beings from across the galaxy. Tall Andromedans with their crystal skins stood next to short, furry Betelgeusians. Even some of the proud Centauri had come, their golden scales gleaming under the lights. All of them wanted to hear more about the strange pink mammals called humans. Zekthara sat in his usual corner, trying to ignore the stares and whispers. He had not asked for this attention. He only wanted to drink his pain away and forget the nightmares that haunted his sleep. But every night someone would ask him to tell another story. A young Andromedian approached his table. Her crystal body sparkled as she moved, and her voice sounded like music when she spoke. "Great warrior," she said with respect, "we have heard about your battle at Proxima Station. But some say you make these stories bigger than they really were. Surely 30. Humans could not hold off 3,000 Vorthok for 6 days." Murmurs of agreement came from around the room. Many of the aliens found Zekthara's first story hard to believe. How could such a small number of weak creatures fight so well against the galaxy's best warriors? Zekthara looked up at the Andromedian with his 4 dark eyes. Slowly, he reached under his armor and pulled out a small metal object. It was a human weapon, badly damaged and covered in burn marks. "This belonged to Jake Morrison," he said quietly. "I took it from Proxima Station. As a reminder, every night I look at it and remember what I learned about humans that day." He set the weapon on the table where everyone could see it. The metal was bent and twisted, clearly damaged beyond repair, but even broken, it looked dangerous. "You think I make my stories bigger than truth?" Zekthara asked. "Then let me tell you about New Berlin, where I learned that what happened at Proxima Station was not unusual for humans. It was normal." The cantina grew quiet. Even the bartender stopped serving drinks to listen. 2 cycles ago, the hegemony decided to take the human colony world of New Berlin. It was their newest settlement, only 50,000 humans living there. Most were farmers and workers, not soldiers. The planet had 1 small defense force and a few old ships in orbit. Zekthara picked up his drink but did not taste it. His claws tapped against the glass as he remembered. The hegemony sent a full invasion fleet. 500 warships, 2 million troops, the best equipment we had. I was there as a battle commander, leading 50,000 Vorthak shock troops. We expected to conquer the planet in 1 day. The human defense force tried to stop us in space. First, 12 old ships against 500 new ones. They lasted exactly 17 minutes before they were all destroyed. We thought the hard part was over. A Betelgeusian in the crowd called out, "What about their ground defenses?" They had 3 military bases with maybe 5,000 real soldiers total. We destroyed all 3 bases in the first hour of landing. Their orbital defense platforms were gone. Their communication networks were down. By any reasonable measure, the war was over. Zekthara finally took a drink and his expression grew darker. But humans are not reasonable. The Defense Force commander was Colonel Lisa Martinez, a small woman with dark hair and fierce eyes. When we demanded surrender, she appeared on every working screen across the planet and said something I will never forget. What did she say? She said, "Attention all citizens of New Berlin. The enemy thinks this war is over because they destroyed our military. They are wrong. This war is just beginning because they are not fighting our military anymore. They are fighting all of us." Zekthara set down his glass and stood up. His massive form cast shadows across the packed cantina. Within 1 hour, every human on that planet became a soldier. Farmers took their farming tools and made weapons. Factory workers built bombs from industrial chemicals. Children as young as 10 years old carried messages between resistance groups. Old people who could barely walk set traps in their homes. "Surely untrained civilians could not fight real warriors?" the Andromedian asked. "That is what we thought." "2," Zekthara replied. "We were very wrong." Martinez had turned the entire planet into one giant fortress. Every building was a bunker. Every street was a killing zone. Every civilian was ready to die fighting. He began to pace around the room, his claws clicking on the metal floor. The humans used everything as weapons. Farm vehicles became tanks. Cooking chemicals became poison gas. They dug tunnels under our camps and filled them with explosives. They poisoned our water supplies. They attacked our supply lines. They made the very ground beneath our feet dangerous. We had them outnumbered 40-1, but it did not matter. We could not fight an entire planet where every person was an enemy. When we took a town during the day, the humans would take it back at night. When we thought we had cleared an area, more fighters would appear from hidden tunnels. Zekthara stopped pacing and looked around the room at all the alien faces watching him. On the 7th day, something happened that I still have nightmares about. We were attacking a small farming town called Green Valley. Only about 3,000 humans lived there, mostly families with young children. We had 10,000 troops, heavy weapons, air support. It should have been easy. What went wrong? Nothing went wrong with our attack. We took the town in 2 hours, but when we got there, we found that every human had stayed to fight, not just the adults, everyone. I saw a human boy who could not have been more than 12 years old, manning a machine gun position until we killed him. I saw an old woman, probably 80 years old, throw herself on one of our vehicles with a bomb strapped to her chest. The cantina was completely silent now. Some of the aliens looked sick. But the worst was Private Danny Cooper. He was guarding a tunnel entrance where the human children were hiding. We hit him with 17 plasma bolts. 17. Any Vorthic warrior would have died from the first one. But Cooper kept fighting for 3 more hours, protecting that tunnel with wounds. That should have killed him 10 times over. Zekthara's voice grew quieter, forcing everyone to lean forward to hear. When we finally got past him, we found the tunnel empty. All the children had escaped while Cooper held us off. He knew he was going to die. He knew he could not win. But he fought anyway, because that is what humans do. We found Cooper's body later, still holding his weapon, still facing toward us. Even in death, he looked ready to keep fighting. I have seen many brave warriors die, but I had never seen anything like that. A Centauri warrior spoke up from the back of the room. Surely the battle ended after that? No, Zekthara said. It went on for 2 more months. Every day more humans died. Every day we lost more troops. Every day the fighting got worse. We controlled the cities during the day, but the humans owned the night. They hid us and disappeared like ghosts. They knew every tree, every rock, every hiding place on their world. Martinez herself seemed to be everywhere at once. She would appear on our communications, taunting us, telling us exactly how many of our troops she had killed that day. She moved around the planet like a spirit, always 1 step ahead of us. The breaking point came when we cornered her in the capital city. We had surrounded the government building where she was making her last stand. 50 of my best warriors went in to capture her. Only 12 came back out. Zekthara sat back down heavily, looking suddenly older and more tired. Martinez died in that building, but not before killing 38 Vorthic shock troops with improvised weapons and booby traps. We found her body in the command center, buried under the rubble. She had destroyed all the planet's records and communication equipment so we could not use them. But even her death did not end the fighting. The humans kept resisting for 6 more weeks after their leader was gone. They fought until we finally decided the planet was not worth the cost. We had lost almost 300,000 troops trying to conquer 50,000 farmers and workers. The aliens in the cantina stared at Zekthara in shock. Many had trouble believing what they had heard. You retreated? The Andromedian asked in disbelief. The mighty hegemony retreated from a planet of farmers? Yes, Zekthara said simply. Because we finally understood something important. We were not fighting an army. We were fighting an entire species that refused to be conquered. Every human was willing to die rather than surrender. Every human was ready to become a warrior when their home was threatened. He picked up Morrison's broken weapon from the table and put it back under his armor. That is when I began to fear humans. Not because they are strong or have good weapons. I fear them because they never stop fighting. They never give up. They never accept defeat, even when defeat is the only logical choice. Zekthara stood up to leave but paused at the door. You want to know why the hegemony is now negotiating peace with humanity instead of trying to conquer them? Because we learned at New Berlin that some battles cannot be won, no matter how many troops you have. Some enemies are too dangerous to fight, not because of what they can do to you, but because of what they are willing to do to themselves to stop you. A full week had passed since Zekthara told his second story about the humans. Word had spread far beyond Kepler 7 station. Ships arrived daily carrying alien warriors who had traveled across the galaxy just to hear the scarred Vorac speak. The cantina owner had started charging double for drinks, and still the place was packed every night. Tonight, beings from species that normally hated each other sat side by side, united by their curiosity about humanity. Proud Rigelian nobles shared tables with crude Outer Rim pirates. Even representatives from the Hegemony High Command had arrived, though they tried to hide their identities under heavy robes. Zekthara had grown tired of the attention. Fame brought problems he did not want. Military leaders asked him to speak. At their academies, reporters wanted to record his stories. Politicians offered him money to change his words. But tonight, like every night, he sat in his corner and drank alone. A Rigelian commander approached his table. The alien silver skin gleamed under the lights, and his voice carried the authority of someone used to being obeyed. Vorthic warrior, the Rigelian said formally. I am Commander Veltar of the 5th Rigelian Fleet. I have come to hear your tales of human warfare. My superiors wish to know if these stories are true or merely the fantasies of a broken soldier. Murmurs spread through the cantina. The Rigelians were known for their pride and their perfect military records. They had never lost a major battle in over 1,000 years. If they were asking about humans, the situation was more serious than many had realized. Zekthara looked up at the silver-skinned commander with tired eyes. You want to know if my stories are true? Then let me tell you about Captain Roy Stevens and the ghost ship that haunts my dreams. The cantina fell silent. Even the machines seemed to stop humming. One cycle ago, I was leading an elite boarding party to capture the human dreadnought Valkyrie. It was a new ship fresh from Earth's shipyards with the latest human technology. Intelligence told us it carried important military secrets that the hegemony needed. Zekthara paused to take a drink. His hands shook slightly and several aliens noticed. The Valkyrie was badly damaged from a previous battle. Its escort ships were destroyed. Its engines were failing. It was alone in space, drifting helplessly. The perfect target for capture. How many humans were aboard? Asked a voice from the crowd. Sensors showed a crew of 300. But by the time we boarded, most were already dead from the battle damage. Life support was failing. The ship was dark and cold. We expected to find survivors huddled together, waiting to surrender. Zekthara's voice grew quieter, and the aliens had to strain to hear him. Instead, we found Captain Roy Stevens, a tall human with gray hair and cold blue eyes. He was alone in the command center when we arrived, sitting in his captain's chair like it was a throne. His crew was dead. His ship was dying. He had no weapons except a simple sidearm. Surely one human could not fight an elite boarding party? That is what I thought too, Zekthara replied. I brought 40 of my best warriors. We had assault armor, plasma weapons, and combat experience spanning decades. One injured human should have been no challenge at all. The Vortex stood up and began pacing, his claws clicking nervously on the metal floor. Stevens looked at us and smiled. Not the terrified smile of someone trying to hide their fear. A genuine smile, like he was happy to see us. He said, "Welcome aboard the Valkyrie, gentlemen. I hope you enjoy your stay." Then he pressed a button on his command chair, and everything went wrong. Zekthara stopped pacing and stared into space. Remembering, the lights went out. Emergency power kicked in, but it was dim and red, casting strange shadows everywhere. The gravity generator started fluctuating, making us stumble and fall. Blast doors began opening and closing randomly throughout the ship, and somewhere in the darkness we could hear Stevens laughing. He had turned his own ship into a weapon. Against us. The human knew every system, every corridor, every hiding place on that vessel. While we stumbled around in the dark, he moved through the ship like a ghost. A Betelgeusian warrior leaned forward. How could one human fight 40? Trained soldiers? He did not fight us directly at first. He was smarter than that. Stevens used the ship itself as his weapon. He would redirect power to different sections, trapping us in areas with no light or air. He used the maintenance systems to flood corridors with scalding steam. He turned the artificial gravity on and off to make us sick and disoriented. Zekthara's forearms gestured as he spoke, showing his growing agitation. My warriors started disappearing one by one. We would be moving through a corridor, and suddenly the soldier behind you was gone. No sound, no struggle, just gone. We would find their bodies later, killed by improvised traps or maintenance tools turned into weapons. Stevens had taken apart half the ship's systems and rebuilt them into death traps. Electrical cables became snares. Coolant pipes became poison gas dispensers. Even the food dispensers in the mess hall had been rigged to explode when touched. The Commander Veltar shifted uncomfortably. Surely your superior numbers gave you an advantage? Numbers meant nothing on that ship, Zekthara said bitterly. The corridors were narrow, designed for human-sized beings. We could only move in small groups. And Stevens knew exactly where we were at all times because he still had access to the ship's sensors. He would appear suddenly, attack with whatever weapon he had found, then vanish into the maintenance shafts before we could react. Sometimes it was a plasma cutter from the engineering bay. Sometimes it was a simple wrench. Once he killed 2 of my warriors with nothing but a fire extinguisher and his bare hands. Zekthara sat back down heavily, his massive frame making the chair creak. The worst part was not knowing where he would strike next. He left messages for us written on the walls in his own blood. "Welcome to my house," one said. "Room for one more," said another. He was playing with us like a predator toys with its prey. By the 4th hour, half my warriors were dead. The survivors were terrified, jumping at every shadow. These were elite Vorac troops, veterans of 100 battles, reduced to frightened children by one human and his dying ship. "What did you do?" asked the Rigelian commander. I tried to hunt him down personally. I thought if I could find Stevens and kill him, the nightmare would end. So I went alone into the deepest parts of the ship, following the trail of Badas and traps he had left behind. Zekthara's voice became a whisper, and every alien in the cantina leaned forward to hear. I found him in the engine room, standing among the massive power cores that kept the ship alive. He was wounded, bleeding from several cuts, his uniform torn and dirty. But he was still smiling that terrible smile. He looked at me and said, "You must be the boss. I was wondering when you would show up. Ready for the grand finale?" I raised my weapon to kill him, but Stevens was faster. He had rigged the entire engine room with explosives. Not enough to destroy the ship, just enough to damage the containment fields around the power cores. He held up a detonator and said, "Your move, big guy. You can kill me, but if you do, this entire section of the ship becomes a radiation death trap. Your remaining warriors will die slowly and painfully. Or you can leave now, and maybe some of them will survive." The cantina was completely silent. No one moved or spoke. I had him at gunpoint. I could have ended it right there. But Stevens was not bluffing. I could see the explosive charges he had placed around the power cores. If they went off, the radiation would kill everyone on the ship within hours. "So you retreated?" Veltar asked in disbelief. "Yes," Zekthara said simply. I ordered my remaining warriors to evacuate immediately. We left Stevens alone on his dying ship, still standing among the power cores, still smiling. As our transport pulled away from the Valkyrie, Stevens contacted us one last time. He appeared on our communication screen, looking directly at me through the camera. What did he say? Zekthara closed his 4 eyes and recited the words from memory. He said, "Thanks for visiting the Valkyrie. Tell your friends that Captain Roy Stevens sends his regards. And remember, this is what happens when you threaten our home." Then he cut the connection. The Valkyrie drifted away into space, dark and silent. We never saw Stevens again, but we all knew he was still alive in there, waiting in the darkness. The Vorthic warrior opened his eyes and looked around the room at all the alien faces staring at him. I lost 26 elite warriors that day. 26 of the finest soldiers the hegemony had ever trained, killed by one human with improvised weapons and an intimate knowledge of his ship. And the worst part was that Stevens enjoyed it. He was not fighting out of desperation or fear. He was fighting because that is what humans do when someone invades their territory. Commander Veltar was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was troubled. This human, Stevens, was he some kind of special forces soldier? An elite commando? No, Zekthara replied. According to our intelligence files, Roy Stevens was a cargo ship captain before the war started. He had no military training, no combat experience. He was just a merchant who transported goods between planets. Then how? Because humans do not need training to become dangerous. They do not need special equipment or years of preparation. The cantina on Kepler 7 station had become famous across the galaxy. Ships arrived hourly, bringing alien warriors, military commanders, and government officials from every corner of known space. The small establishment could no longer hold all the visitors, so loudspeakers had been installed to broadcast Zekthara's stories to the crowds gathered outside. Tonight, the audience included members of the Hegemony War Council themselves. They sat in disguise at a corner table, their faces hidden by privacy fields, but Zekthara knew who they were. He could smell their fear scent even through their electronic masks. The scarred, Vorthic warrior had grown weary of his unwanted fame. Every day brought new requests for interviews, book deals, and speaking engagements. Military academies across the galaxy wanted him to teach courses on human warfare. But all Zekthara wanted was to forget the nightmares that plagued his sleep. A young hegemony officer, barely out of training academy, stood up from the crowd. His purple skin marked him as a Kepler native, and his voice shook with nervous energy. "Great warrior," the young officer said, "your stories have reached the highest levels of command. But some question whether these humans could truly be as dangerous as you claim. Surely trained military forces would perform better than miners. And cargo captains?" Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Many of the aliens found it hard to believe that such primitive creatures could pose a real threat to the galaxy's military might. Zekthara stared at the young officer for a long moment. His forearms trembled slightly as old memories surfaced. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "You want to know about trained humans? Then let me tell you about Dr. Amy Carter and why I wake up screaming her name every night." The cantina fell into absolute silence. Even the sounds from outside seemed to fade away. 6 months ago, I was ordered to lead a raid on a human research station called Titan's Edge. It was a small facility orbiting a gas giant, studying diseases and how to cure them. Intelligence told us there were only 50 humans aboard, all scientists and medical workers. No soldiers, no weapons, no defenses. Zekthara stood up slowly, his massive frame casting shadows across the packed room. The mission seemed simple. Capture the station, take their research data, and eliminate any witnesses. Medical knowledge was valuable, and the hegemony wanted to understand human biology better. It should have been easy. What went wrong? Asked. Someone from the crowd. Everything, Zekthara replied. But first, let me tell you about Dr. Amy Carter. She was the station's lead researcher, a small human female with brown hair and kind eyes. According to her files, she had spent her entire life healing people, curing diseases, saving lives. She had never hurt anyone in her 40 years of existence. The Vorthic warrior began pacing, his claws clicking anxiously on the metal floor. We approached the station expecting no resistance. Our ships surrounded the facility, and I contacted their command center to demand surrender. Dr. Carter appeared on the communication screen, still wearing her white laboratory coat, still looking like the gentle healer she had always been. "What did she say?" "She said, I know why you are here. You want our research on biological weapons countermeasures. I cannot let you have it. That knowledge could be used to hurt people, and I swore an oath to do no harm. Zekthara stopped pacing and looked directly at the young hegemony officer. I told her that resistance was useless. We had 3 ships and 500 troops. She had 50 unarmed scientists. I gave her 1 hour to surrender before we would take the station by force. Dr. Carter smiled at me through the screen. The same kind smile she probably gave to patients she was trying to heal. She said, "Thank you for the warning, Captain." 1 hour should be enough. The aliens in the cantina shifted uncomfortably. They had learned to fear that phrase from Zekthara's previous stories. The communication cut out and we waited. I expected the humans to spend that hour arguing about surrender or maybe trying to destroy their research data. Instead, they did something that still gives me nightmares. Zekthara's voice grew quieter, forcing everyone to lean forward. Dr. Carter spent that hour turning her medical laboratory into a fortress of death. She used her knowledge of biology, chemistry, and disease to create the most terrifying defensive system I have ever encountered. How could medical equipment become weapons? You would be surprised what a skilled doctor can do when they decide to stop healing and start hurting. Carter took the station's air recycling system and modified it to produce toxic gas that was harmless to humans but deadly to most alien species. She used the laboratory's chemical supplies to create acid traps that would melt through our armor. She even modified the medical scanners to detect our biological signatures and trigger automated defenses. Zekthara shuddered visibly, his thick carapace rippling with remembered fear. When the hour was up, we began our assault. The first boarding party of 50 warriors entered through the station's main docking bay. Within 10 minutes, they were all dead, not wounded, not unconscious, but completely dead. What killed them? Dr. Carter had filled the docking bay with a modified version of a cleaning chemical that reacted with the oxygen in our breathing apparatus. The moment my warriors took a breath, their lungs began to dissolve from the inside. They died choking on their own blood while their armor melted. Around them, the young hegemony officer looked sick. Several other aliens in the crowd were making distressed noises. The second wave tried to enter through the emergency airlocks. Carter had rigged those with pressure bombs made from medical oxygen tanks. 20 more warriors were torn apart by the explosions before they could even get inside the station. By this point, I realized we were not fighting a gentle doctor anymore. Dr. Carter had become something else entirely. Something that understood death better than any soldier. Zekthara sat back down, his massive weight making the chair groan. I decided to lead the third assault myself. We cut through the station's hull with plasma torches, avoiding all the normal entry points. We came in through the laboratory section, thinking we could surprise her. Instead, we found ourselves in a maze of horrors that no warrior should ever have to face. The Vorthic's voice became a whisper, and the entire cantina strained to hear his words. Carter had turned her laboratory into a house of biological nightmares. She had released modified bacteria into the air that would eat through certain metals, causing our weapons to fall apart in our hands. She had rigged the lab equipment to spray acid when triggered by motion sensors. She had even created a fog of microscopic organisms that would attack the nervous systems of anyone who breathed them. But the worst part was Carter herself. We finally cornered her in the main research lab, surrounded by all her equipment and data. She was still wearing her white coat, still looking like a doctor, but her eyes had changed. They were cold and calculating, like a predator studying its prey. She looked at us and said, "Welcome to my laboratory, gentlemen. I hope you will participate in my final experiment." The aliens in the cantina were completely silent now. Even the sounds of breathing seemed too loud. Then she activated something on her computer, and every piece of equipment in the lab started working at once. Machines I could not identify began producing clouds of colored gas. Automated systems started spraying unknown chemicals. The very air became poisonous to breathe. Carter stood in the middle of it all, protected by some kind of environmental suit she had modified. She was immune to her own weapons, but we were not. My warriors started falling one by one, killed by diseases that had been extinct for centuries. Poisons that had no known antidotes, biological agents that attacked specific organs, Zekthara's four hands clenched into fists as he remembered. I tried to shoot her, but my weapon had been dissolved by her bacteria. I tried to reach her with my bare hands, but the poisonous fog was too thick. All I could do was watch as my elite troops died around me, victims of a doctor who had decided to embrace death instead of life. How did you escape? Asked the young officer. I did not escape. Carter let me live. When all my warriors were dead, she walked up to me through the toxic fog and looked into my eyes. She said, "You will go back to your commanders and tell them what happened here. You will tell them that this is what humans become when you threaten the knowledge we use to heal people." Then she did something that haunts me more than all the death and horror. She took off her environmental helmet and breathed the poisonous air she had created, the same air that had killed 50 of my best warriors. It did not affect her at all. How is that possible? Because Dr. Carter had modified herself. She had used her medical knowledge to change her own biology, making herself immune to every weapon she had created. She had turned herself into a living biological weapon that could survive in conditions that would kill anyone else. Zekthara stood up again, his movements showing his age and weariness. Carter walked me back to my ship personally, chatting about her research as if nothing had happened. She told me about new cures she was developing, about diseases she hoped to eliminate. She spoke like the gentle healer she had once been, even though she was surrounded by the bodies of my dead warriors. At the airlock, she handed me a data PAD containing all her research. Give this to your medical officers. 1 month had passed since Zekthara told his last story about the humans. The cantina on Kepler 7 station was closing forever tonight. The constant stream of visitors seeking war stories had driven away all the regular customers. The owner, a tired Betelgeusian named Grex, had decided he wanted his quiet drinking establishment back. Most of the aliens who had come to hear Zekthara's tales had already left the station. Military commanders had returned to their fleets with new orders. Government officials had rushed back to their home worlds to change policies. Scientists had been reassigned to study human biology and psychology, but Zekthara remained sitting alone in his usual corner as the cantina staff packed up glasses and chairs around him. He had nowhere else to go. The hegemony had quietly retired him from active service after his stories spread through the military ranks. They called it an honorable discharge, but Zekthara knew the truth. His commanders feared that his respect for humans made him unreliable in future conflicts. The cantina was nearly empty now. Only a few late customers remained, finishing their final drinks before Grex closed the doors forever. The famous loudspeakers had been disconnected. The special lighting had been turned off. Soon this place would return to being just another small bar on a neutral station. Zekthara was about to leave when he noticed a human sitting at the bar. The man was small and ordinary-looking, with brown hair and work clothes that marked him as a cargo trader or transport pilot. He seemed out of place among the remaining alien customers. The human finished his drink and walked over to Zekthara's table. He moved with the careful confidence of someone who had spent years traveling through dangerous space. When he spoke, his voice was calm and friendly. "You're the Vorac who's been telling stories about us," the human said quietly. He pulled out a chair and sat down without waiting for permission. "I'm Pete Johnson. I captain a small cargo ship called the Wanderer." Zekthara tensed, his four hands moving instinctively toward his weapons. After months of describing human warriors, he was not sure how he would react to meeting an actual human face-to-face. "You are not here to fight?" Zekthara asked carefully. Pete smiled and raised his hands to show they were empty. "Not here to fight. I'm here to ask why." "Why what?" "Why you've been telling these stories. I've heard them all, Jake Morrison at Proxima Station, Lisa Martinez on New Berlin, Roy Stevens and his ghost ship, Dr. Amy Carter and her laboratory of horrors, all of them." Zekthara studied the human's face, looking for signs of anger or aggression. Instead, he saw only curiosity and something that might have been sadness. "Your people are monsters," Zekthara said slowly. "I have seen what humans become when they are cornered. I have watched your kind transform from gentle beings into creatures of pure destruction. Why would you not be angry that I tell these truths? Pete was quiet for a moment, considering his words. Because they are truths. Every word you've said about us is accurate. We do become monsters when we're threatened. We do fight until the very end. We do turn everything we touch into a weapon. Then why are you here? Because I want to understand. Why a Vorthic warrior, one of the most feared beings in the galaxy, has spent the last month warning other aliens about how dangerous we are. Zekthara looked around the nearly empty cantina. Grex was counting his register behind the bar. A few aliens were still drinking quietly at distant tables. The place felt safe somehow. Neutral, a good place for honest conversation. You want the truth? Zekthara asked. That's why I'm here. The old Vorthic warrior was silent for several minutes, gathering his thoughts. When he finally spoke, his voice was different. Tired, but also relieved, as if he was finally sharing a burden he had carried too long. I have been spreading these stories as a warning to the younger generation of alien warriors. The hegemony's war against humanity was not the glorious conquest we expected. It was a nightmare that cost millions of alien lives. Pete nodded slowly. And now? Now the hegemony is quietly negotiating for peace. Not because your military defeated ours, but because our leaders finally understand what kind of enemy they were fighting. What kind of enemy is that? Zekthara's 4 eyes fixed on Pete's face. The kind that cannot be conquered. The kind that will destroy itself rather than surrender. The kind that turns every citizen into a potential weapon. The human traitor leaned back in his chair. You make us sound pretty scary? You should be scared of yourselves, Zekthara replied. I have fought many species across the galaxy. Some are stronger than humans, some are smarter, some have better technology. But none of them have what you have. Which is the absolute refusal to accept defeat. Most species have limits. When the cost becomes too high, they surrender. When the odds become impossible, they retreat. When their leaders are killed, they collapse. But humans just keep fighting. Zekthara stood up and walked to the cantina's large observation window. Outside, ships continued to dock and depart from Kepler 7 station. The galaxy went on with its business, unaware of the conversation taking place in the closing bar. Your species should have been extinct within a cycle, Zekthara said, looking out at the stars. You were primitives, barely capable of interstellar travel. Your weapons were inferior, your ships were outdated. Your military was small and inexperienced. But we're still here, Pete said quietly. Yes, you are still here, and do you know why? Tell me. Zekthara turned back to face the human. Because when we attacked your colonies, we expected to fight your soldiers. Instead, we found ourselves fighting your entire species. Every human became a warrior. Your farmers, your teachers, your doctors, your children, all of them willing to die rather than submit. That doesn't sound very smart. Smart? Zekthara laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. It was the opposite of smart. It was insane. But it was also effective. How do you conquer people who would rather die than be conquered? How do you defeat an enemy where every single individual is ready to become a weapon? Pete was quiet, thinking about the implications of what the alien was saying. We learned that humans do not fight to win, Zekthara continued. You fight to ensure your enemy never threatens anyone again. Even if it costs you everything, the old warrior sat back down at the table. Jake Morrison could have surrendered Proxima Station and saved his crew. Instead, he held out for 6 days and forced us to lose 800 troops taking a worthless mining facility. Lisa Martinez could have evacuated New Berlin when our fleet arrived. Instead, she turned an entire planet into a fortress and made us pay for every meter of ground with blood. Roy Stevens could have abandoned his damaged ship and escaped in a life pod. Instead, he stayed aboard and turned the Valkyrie into a death trap that still haunts my dreams. Dr. Carter could have given us her research and lived. Instead, she destroyed everything she had worked for and took 700 of our troops with her. Zekthara's voice grew softer. None of them made the smart choice. None of them chose survival over principle. And that terrified us more than any weapon you could have built. Pete nodded slowly. Because if our ordinary people could do that, what would our actual soldiers be capable of? Exactly, we realized we were not fighting a military. We were fighting a culture that produces warriors from bakers and teachers and cargo pilots. Zekthara looked directly at Pete. People like you? I'm just a trader, Pete protested. Are you? If someone attacked your ship, your cargo, your crew, what would you become? The human was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. I'd become whatever I needed to become to protect them. And that is why we fear you. Because when a human decides to fight, they do not fight to win. They fight to ensure their enemy learns never to threaten humans again. The two sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars through the cantina's windows. Finally, Pete spoke again. So what happens now? Your stories have probably prevented a lot of wars. Perhaps the younger generation of alien warriors now knows that attacking humans is not glorious conquest. It is slow, costly suicide. Maybe that knowledge will keep the peace. And you? What will you do now? Zekthara considered the question. I am too old to fight and too honest to serve politicians. Perhaps I will find a quiet place to drink and try to forget the nightmares. Pete smiled. If you ever need cargo transported, anywhere, look up the Wanderer. I owe you a debt for probably saving a lot of human lives with your warnings. You do not owe me anything, Zekthara replied. I did not tell these stories to help humans. I told them to save my own people from making a terrible mistake. Maybe, but the effect is the same. The human stood up and extended his hand. After a moment of confusion, Zekthara realized it was a human gesture of respect and friendship. He gently touched Pete's hand with one of his clawed fingers. Take care of yourself, old warrior, Pete said. The galaxy is a little safer because of what you've done? Take care of yourself as well, Captain Johnson, and remember what I said about your people. You have a great power, but power without wisdom leads to destruction. Pete nodded and walked toward the cantina's exit. At the door, he turned back one last time. For what it's worth, most of us don't want to be monsters. We just become them when we have no choice.